Cunastee, how are ye? Welcome to the Candlelittales podcast.
We tell Irish myths with music and have a chat about it in the next episode. My name is Sorcha and I'm here with my brother Aaron Hegarty.
This week we are listening to the story of the first battle of Moy Tura, told by Sorcha and me.
This podcast is brought to you thanks to our Patreon supporters. Thank you. Go to candlelittales.ie to find out more about us or follow us on any social media at Candlelit
Now, Sorcha, tell us a story, will you?
The shriek of the goddess reverberated around the hall. Throughout the reign of King Uchi of the Fír Bolg, no rain had fallen, only gentle dew at dawn. But now, for the first time in decades, ushered in by the shriek of the goddess, the Fír Bolg heard it, drumming on their roofs. A cold rain began to fall. And all of the Fír Bolg looked at each other. But they had decided, and they were not a people who knew the meaning of backing down. And so the Fír Bolg, with their king Uchi and their champion Shreng, they made their way west to the plain of the battle to come. All the time they marched, the battle crow flew overhead, shrieking and screaming, raining down on them fire and blood. And when they got to the place of the battle and began to make their preparations, they set their own sorcerers against her. And by rallying all together, the magic workers of the Fír Bolg were able to put an end at last to the maddening noise of the battle crow, and the Marignu was silenced for the time being. They dug themselves a trench, a great trench, the place where all their attacks would come from, the place they could retreat to at the end of the day. And they dug a healing well, and their healers cast herbs into it. And they did not know it then, but that trench they made would become known as the Trench of the Packs, for the packs of wild dogs that would come there, drawn by the scent of blood that was on the air. As they were making ready, an envoy of the Tuath De Dannan came to them, the poet Carbra. And he came with smiles, and he came with promises, and he came with gifts. Carbra said to them, "Would you like us to make your spears for you? Seeing as the Tuath De Dannan have such light and wonderful spears, so sharp, so venomous, so deadly." And King Uchi, he could not see a downside to this, and so he agreed. Carbra said to them, "Since it is that you are going to accept a gift from us, we will accept a gift from you as well. And we will take the decision of how the forces are to be arranged. We don't want to fight all at once and have the battle over the course of one day. We want to have a battle over the course of many days, with 4 battalions against 4 battalions on each day." And Uchi, the king of the Fír Bolg, the first High King of Ireland, glared at the earth in front of him. But he could not say anything to Carbra, because he had agreed to the Tuath De Dannan gift, and they were owed a gift in return. It was true what the poet said. But he'd twisted truth to his own advantage. The Fír Bolg were more numerous than the Tuath De Dannan. They had 11 battalions, and the Tuath De had only 8, and now they had given away their advantage for the sake of the spears of the Tuath De. Uchi had one more preparation to make. One more idea that he thought might help them in the battle to come, that might even make the difference. There was a great sage living in Ireland, a man who had been there long before the Fír Bolg, long before Nemad had come, long ago, who had met them and been a counsellor to them from time to time. His name was Fintan Maghtuireadh, and now in the hour of their great need, Uchi, the king of the Fír Bolg, sent for the sage, for his counsel.
The rain lashed and lashed and lashed with whipping wind. Carbra came back to the Tuath De Dannan, where they were on the coast where they had burned their ships. Nuada, the king of these people, asked Carbra what was the news. War would be needed to be prepared for, Carbra told him. And so they made their tracks away from the coast to make a fort for themselves and make preparations. And, as Carbra informed him, to make weapons and spears for the Fír Bolg, because this was how they tricked them into not using their numbers against them. They would offer slick and shining weapons, but not their best, and certainly not their healing wells. Adin Kek set about digging a great well to fill with healing herbs so that he could rejuvenate all that went into battle. But while they were making preparations and weapons for their foes, they saw someone coming towards them, an emissary from the Fír Bolg. Ruad was his name. Ruad came with 15 behind him, all of them holding hurleys. A challenge was dealt to the Tuath De Dannan. A game of hurling would have to be had. Nuada, the king of the Tuath De, set forth a team of great hurlers, skillful and slick, young and great in every way of this fantastic game. After all, they both knew the game. And when the ball was thrown in, the great game was had, and they watched as the skill and speed of the Tuath De Dannan could be seen for all. Slick and sharp were their movements from one side of the pitch to the other, crossing the ball, great feats and great displays as the Fír Bolg, led by Ruad, parried and bashed and hit and fiercely fought for the ball. Then, as the game began to tip away from Ruad and the Fír Bolg, they began to hit and bludgeon and batter and bruise, using their hurleys as weapons now, not going for the ball at all. And Ruad then crushed a man's head in his hand, and the hurleys cracked skulls, and the bodies of the players that died in the field were piled together. The cairn of the hurlers was its name from that day forward. Ruad went back with news of their loss to the Fír Bolg, and preparations were made to face the skillful and fast Tuath De Dannan. 6 weeks went by in these preparations as the Fír Bolg sent the javelins to the Tuath De Dannan, receiving the agile and cleverly crafted weapons that they had given them, and the agreement was 4 battalions would be sent to the Fort of the Onsets. This was the name given to the Tuath De Dannan's place for the many onsets that the Fír Bolg threw at them. And when the battle was to be fought, the Dagda, the good god, he led 4 battalions of the Tuath De Dannan forward to face the Fír Bolg. Curb, the leader of the Fír Bolg, he led their 4 battalions, and Fach, the poet of the Fír Bolg, he brought a great pillar to stand in between, watching the 2 sides come towards each other, and like waves crashing off rocks, they fought against each other as Fach from his pillar wept tears to see the bloodshed, as champion faced champion, and many lives were lost, heads rolled and bloodshed onto the plain of Moy Tura, as Fach watched, recorded, to report it all at the end of the day.
And at the end of the day, the Tuath De went back to their healing pools, and there their physician Dian Kecht, he was able to restore the bodies of the Tuath De Dannan. He was able to bring them back, make them whole again. But he turned to his 3 brothers and he said, "The Fír Bolg have the advantage, for they are more numerous than we are. Go and find out. Can they heal as well as I?" And the following morning, King Ochi of the Fír Bolg went to the healing well alone and early to wash his hands and wash his face, make himself ready for the day. Another grueling day of overseeing this battle, directing his forces and watching from afar. And as he bent over the healing well, not so thick with herbs as that of the Tuath De, 3 warriors sprang out. The brothers of Dian Kecht, they pointed their weapons at Ochi, and he begged them for a chance to go back, to get his own weapons, to face them in a fair fight. But they said no, and they fell on him. And as he scrambled back in the wet grass, a champion of the Fír Bolg sprang out in front of his king, threw his body in front of the weapons of the brothers of Dian Kecht, took the wounds they gave him and gave them their wounds back again. He killed the 3 of them and they cut him down. And Ochi raised a cairn, the cairn of the champion. But from that day to this, his name was never known. The unknown champion who gave his life to save his king. It was never known. He was never forgotten. That day, the battle did not go the Fír Bolg way. There were great heroic deeds done. Ruaidh, the hurler, he fought at single combat and he won. And although many were slaughtered, many Tuath De Dannan lost their lives, many more of the Fír Bolg were cut down, and more still were wounded and weary by the end of the fighting. They dragged themselves back to their fort that was already beginning to stink of blood, and corpses were already beginning to pile high around them. And at the end of every day of battle, each warrior of the Fír Bolg carried with him a stone in one hand and a trophy in the other, the head of an enemy if he had been able to cut one off. And they piled them next to the piles of the previous day. And just by looking at them, King Ochi could see the pile of their fallen enemies was smaller. The pile of stones brought back by their returning warriors was smaller still. And Ochi turned to Curb and said, "Is it losing this battle we are?" And Curb said, "It is."
With rolling thunder and cracking of lightning, the clouds gathered together and continue to shed rain down on the plains of Moy Tura.
Shreng of the Fír Bolg had grey hair and knew he would not fight this day. So he looked to his son. The huge, colossal shoulders lifted the weighted 4-sided helmet atop his head, and Shreng picked up his battle axe, his heavy oaken shield, and his rustic armour as he commanded the troops to follow his lead. Everyone was inspired when Shreng took to the field, and Curb alongside him knew the heroes that would go and face the Tuath De this day, But when they saw the battle club being swung by the Dagda and him calling a great cry for the Tuath De Dannan to face the Fír Bolg, they saw great cries echo all over the land, as they saw pillars of stone being brought forth from druids and poets, and all of those that were climbing upon it to watch down, cast spells and record sonnets and songs and stories. For this day, the third day, would see some great, brilliant battles fought this day, and they would have it all retained in their mind's eye, clear and crystal. Kerb marshalled his section, the 4 battalions now facing the Tuath De Dannan. As they faced each other, great heroes were lost on both sides. The Dagda tried to hit on the one side of his Kerb to kill the other side to bring back to life, but he did not have the time to be bringing back those to live, as he had to kill those that were coming towards him. There were so many heroes to be faced, so many fights to be fought, that Shreng could only knock so many down before the slick, agile weapons of the Tuath De Dannan could be seen coming at them over pointed shield and spears thrown, sharp swords cutting so hard into the flesh of the Fír Bolg. Many died that day, but Kerb set his eyes on the Dagda. Kerb and Dagda, they fought a bloody battle that day, knocking each other down, but the Dagda, having his battering blows, beating Kerb back, he bludgeoned his brains into the soil, bloodening them onto the plains of Moy Tura. And so it was that when the Tuath De Dannan left that day, they brought more heads to make a great cairn, and each side had cairns of fallen. Both sides were weary, bludgeoned, bruised, and beaten, for a third day of battle was so tough and so hard, not a warrior on the field left without a scar. But the kept healing herbs rejuvenated the Tuath De Dannan, and the Dagda, he played on his harp uav the songs to heal the minds for the loss of many lives, so the Tuath De Dannan could cry for the fallen, rejuvenate their victory, their mind's eye now set to beat the Fír Bolg the next day.
On the 4th day, the Fír Bolg were weary indeed. Weary and feeling already defeated, feeling already as though this battle was lost. But they were not a people who gave up easily. And at this final hour, the sage arrived. Fintan Maghtuireadh, coming to their rescue, coming to give the counsel to their king, coming with his 13 warrior sons, all brilliant, all in the prime of their lives. And Fintan went into council with King Uchi. The 2 wise men put their 2 wise heads together, and Fintan said that if the head of the snake was cut, the rest of the snake would fall. They must concentrate all their efforts, everything that they had, on taking out the king of the Tuath De Dannan, on killing Nuada. Uchi was careful this day with how he arrayed his troops. Kerb had died of his wounds from the battle with the Dagda, and he was no longer there to lead. And so Uchi changed the disposition of the troops. He put the veterans on the flanks, he put the younger men in the middle so they would be bolstered by them. Behind them, again, were older men too old to fight, and servants to bring them food and water and supplies to keep them going through the day, because on this day the Fír Bolg had decided there would be no surrender, whether or not there was defeat or victory. They were not going to give up. They were not going to leave. Some even tied themselves to the pillars of the poets. so that even if they wanted to, even if their courage failed them, there would be no way that they could run from the battlefield, from the terrible beauty of the Tuath De Dannan. And Fintan's 13 sons, they made straight as an arrow, straight as the flight of a hawk for Nuada and his bodyguard of elite soldiers. And they cut down Nuada's bodyguard, but every one of Fintan's sons was cut down in his turn. And when he saw that from atop his pillar, Fátach, the poet of the Fír Bolg, he sang a lament, and his words and his melody rang out over the battlefield. He saw the end of the Fír Bolg. That even though they still stood and still breathed and still fought, the battle was over, and they had lost.
Soaked, sodden and sticky with rain and blood, the plain was hard to walk in, let alone stand in, let alone fight in.
But the fighting was not done, as every one of the Tuath De Dannan was weaving their way through the battlefield with such skill and such grace they were causing destruction in the face of the Fír Bolg, as they threw their lives at them, not wanting to flee but facing them till death met them. And as Shreng went and now saw so many beaten and so many battered and so many bloodied, he saw the king Nuada without his cohort around him, and he took out his great battle axe and went launching straight for him, dealing him 9 great blows. But Nuada was quick, just as quick as Shreng had thought he might be, as he parried and ducked and dived, dealing 9 blows swiftly to the side of Shreng, who managed to not get killed, and in doing so swung the great axe to the side of Nuada, chopping his arm from him. The Dagda saw this and reached his good hand and pulled Nuada away from his certain death, as Shreng dug his battle axe into the ground, missing Nuada by a hair. The fighting could only get worse as Shreng scanned the bloody battlefield then. And for every one that was dying, he saw more die still, and he saw the Tuath De Dannan now. Every one of the heroes were taking to the field, with shining lights coming from them, emanating from the greatness of their heroes. The Dagda, Agma, together with Bress the Beautiful, were carving through. And now Angus, Ead, Kermid the Fair, Mithir, Bov Darag, Nuada the High King was safe with one arm still, as Brian, Iker and Ichabur, the 3 sons of Tiran, took his place, while Cu, Cian and Kethin, the 3 sons of Caincha, cut through them, and Gobnu the smith was on the field, and Credna the craftsman, the Inkek the physician was even fighting, and the 3 queens, Era, Fola and Bamba. They were casting spells, pushing the Fír Bolg back, and the 3 sorceresses, Macha, Bav, Maragin, behind them, Mechama and Dannan herself were causing the greatness of the Fír Bolg to shrink away, as the Tuath De would surely claim this day. Shreng picked up his battle axe, never giving up, resolute till the end.
The High King of the Fír Bolg, Ochi, the first true High King this island had ever seen. King who ruled from the province of Tara, a king in whose reign no rain fell, until the coming of these new people, who brought with them blood and rain and tears. A king in the truest sense of the word. For all this fight he had held back. He had directed, he had coordinated. But now he saw there were too few on the field. And so the king of the Fír Bolg took up his arms and took to the field to rally his own troops. But it was late in the day and his troops were tired. And when they saw him coming, the sorcerers of the Tuath De Dannan, They put spells on him, spells and hexes. And a terrible thirst came over King Ucky. And at the same time, the sorcerers of the Tuath De Dannan, they put a curse on him, and all the water in this waterlogged island ran away from him, and he could not get a sip of it to quench this terrible thirst, this maddening thirst. The thirst so consumed him that he ran from it, ran wild, forgetting the battle, forgetting everything except this terrible thirst, the dryness in his mouth, the thickness of his tongue. His eyes seemed to bulge out of his head. He ran all the way to the coast, all the way to the strand. And following behind him was a warrior of the Tuath De Dannan. Bress the Beautiful. Their champion, their shining, lovely, graceful warrior. He pursued the cursed king to the strand. And there, where Ucky in his despair tried to drink the waters of the sea, driven mad with his own thirst, Bress cut him down and killed the first true High King like a dog on the strand.
When Shreng saw this, his heart, not broken, not breaking, beat faster. And he called those who were surviving the fight to him, and he gave them one last call. For all around them he saw the horror of this war. He saw Fintan crying over his blooded sons. Many had lost their lives in this terrible fight. The fort now of the Fír Bolg was surrounded by dogs eating on the bodies that were piled high, and the blood pouring down from this fort was like a river. Shreng told them then that they had found their time to make their story great, that the Fír Bolg would not be forgotten. He said, "We gave battle resolutely, and there was great clashing of swords, strong playing of spears by noble heroes, the breaking of shields with battle axes. But now the troubles of Ireland are full, and disaster is what we have found in this fight. But let us not stop here. Let us not live under the yoke of another, for today we will give them our death." And with this great call, a cry came up from the Fír Bolg. Rising in them now was not the hope of victory, but the hope that they could burn themselves into the memories of the poets and bards that were watching, that they could give such a fight so fiercely that the Tuath De Dannan would always remember them, that they would burn themselves into the very ground they were pouring their blood into. And when they saw this, the Dagda, who had pulled Nuada, his king of the Tuath De Dannan, away to save them, well, the Dagda called a halt to the fight. The Tuath De Dannan sprang back like cats when thrown water, and each one of them looked at the Fír Bolg running and rushing towards them, but the Dagda, the good god, held up his hand to stop them. He begged for a cease now in this fighting, for these great heroes the Dagda knew should be given a place in this land to live in. A place should be found for them to stay, and sharing in this island's future is what they should do. And he offered this to Shreng, not to be under the yoke of the Tuath De Dannan, but to live wherever they chose, wherever they saw fit, with the Tuath De alongside them. Shreng glowered, but knowing life was worth living, he nodded, and he chose the very province they were standing in. He chose Connacht, and by doing so, he told the Dagda and the Tuath De Dannan
Get out and leave them be.
And so the Fír Bolg forced their victors to retreat before them, the ones who defeated them fleeing according to their own promises and their own words. And there on the bloodied plains of Connacht, the poets climbed down from their pillars. The first battle of Moy Tura had ended.
This podcast was produced and edited by Oisín Ryan and Rory O'Shea. You can find out more about us on our website, candlelittales.ie.
And we're on all the social media, so like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Candlelit, or send us a message to get onto our mailing list.
For more videos and live streams, like and subscribe to our Candlelittales YouTube channel, which now has a Candlelittales for Kids playlist, #Candlelittales.
Liking and subscribing to our channels really helps us grow and get to more people. And if you're able to give us more direct support, you can chip in a few bob at patreon.com/candlelittales, or make a one-time donation through the PayPal button on our website.
We also do really like to hear back from you with any questions, requests or comments. Leave them in the section below. If you want to find out about our courses, anything like that, just drop us a line.
And we especially appreciate you listening.